Imagine this. You're walking through a quiet museum late at night. The lights are dim, the halls are empty, and in front of you is a display of ruins from a civilization no one remembers. There's a cracked stone bowl, a broken figurine, a piece of carved wood with symbols no one can read anymore. No plaque, no name, just a small card that says, "Origin unknown." You stand there staring at the pieces. They look old, but not familiar. Not Egyptian, not Greek, not Mayan. Something else. Something that doesn't match anything in the history books. Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the shadows of the past, into the quiet corners of history where whole civilizations appeared, thrived, and then disappeared as if they were never here at all. Forget the famous empires everyone knows. Tonight isn't about pyramids or marble statues. It's about the ones that left behind only whispers, a few stones, a few strange symbols, a few mysteries that even experts argue about. Imagine entire cultures swallowed by deserts, coastal villages taken by rising seas, mountain kingdoms, abandoned so quickly, it's like their people walked away in the middle of dinner and never returned. Before we start, hit like and subscribe. Only if you truly enjoy these slow, strange trips into the forgotten parts of history. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time your night has found you. It's always amazing. People all over the world, lying in bed, drifting into sleep, while we bring these lost worlds back for just a moment. So get comfortable. Pull up your blanket, let the quiet settle in, and let's explore the civilizations that vanished without a trace. Our journey begins in a desert where the sand buries secrets deeper than we can imagine, and where our first forgotten civilization waits. Picture an endless stretch of pale gold dunes. Nothing moves. Nothing breaks the surface except the occasional dry shrub and the wind carving long, patient lines across the sand. But beneath those dunes lies the memory of a people almost no one has heard of. Archaeologists call them the people of the Crescent Dunes, not because it was their real name, but because no one knows what they called themselves. Their true name was lost long before writing reached this part of the world, and long before the desert claimed their home. We learned about them from fragments, a piece of pottery decorated with looping patterns, a smooth stone carved with curved lines, a wooden handle from a tool miraculously preserved under layers of dry sand. Small things, quiet things, just enough to show they were here. It's hard to imagine, but thousands of years ago, this wasn't a desert at all. The Crescent Dunes were part of a wide green plain filled with shallow lakes. Families built reed huts near calm water. Children played along muddy banks. Traders passed through on foot, carrying baskets of grain or little bundles of dried fish. They cooked simple meals over low fires. They fished with woven nets. They shaped clay into bowls and jars, leaving thumbprints in the soft material. They wore necklaces made from tiny shells gathered along the old shorelines. Nothing extravagant, just the quiet life of a small, steady community. But even the simplest communities leave mysteries. The people of the Crescent Dunes carved symbols into soft stone, symbols unlike any writing we've seen spirals, lines that branch like trees, circles surrounding smaller circles. Were they stories, directions, prayers? We don't know. We may never know. Then, one year, the rain arrived late. The lake shrank just a little. It wasn't alarming at first. Some families simply walked a bit farther to fetch water. But seasons passed, and each year the rain returned later than before. The air felt warmer. The grass turned pale. It didn't happen in a single disaster. No great flood or sudden quake, just slow, steady drying. Animals migrated away, birds changed their routes, families began moving closer together, collecting what water remained. Long journeys for simple needs, harder days, hotter nights. Eventually, staying became impossible. The lakes were gone. The last reeds turned brittle and brown, and one by one, families packed what they could carry. Clay bowls, stone tools, simple blankets. They left behind their heavier belongings, their hearths, their carved stones, and they walked. Where did they go? Some groups followed the fading river to the south. Others moved toward distant hills where cooler winds blew. A few small camps were found far from the dunes, suggesting they tried to rebuild. But the record breaks apart. Their traces become faint, then fainter, then gone. After they left, the wind finished the job. Sand drifted into empty homes. Fire pits filled and disappeared. Pottery cracked under the heat. Within a generation, nothing recognizable remained. A peaceful place became silent. The dunes rose higher, swallowing the evidence grain by grain. Thousands of years later, archaeologists digging for something else entirely uncovered a small piece of pottery, then another, then stones arranged in a wide curve, a perfect crescent shape. Slowly, a picture formed, a forgotten people, tucked beneath the sand, waiting quietly to be found. That stone ark may be the most mysterious part of their legacy. It isn't a wall, and it isn't a building foundation. It's too perfectly shaped, too deliberately placed. Some believe it aligned with the rising sun on certain days. Others think it marked a gathering space. No one agrees, and that disagreement is part of its charm. Some theories say the ark was used for ceremonies, perhaps welcoming the new season or honoring ancestors. Others suggest it was an early calendar, counting the days by the position of the sun. A few believe it was a protective symbol, built to face the direction of approaching storms, but the truth lies somewhere in the quiet between these ideas. What remained of their homes was modest. Circular floors marked by stones, fire pits lined with clay, bits of charred wood from old meals. Archaeologists found traces of reed weaving, suggesting mats or walls now long gone. Simple lives leave subtle footprints. Their tools tell us more. Sharp stone blades for cutting fish, smooth grinding stones for crushing seeds, needles carved from bone, handles shaped from wood. Nothing advanced, but everything crafted with careful hands. Tools made to last, even though the people who held them did not. And then there is the question of their art. Small clay figurines, shaped like humans. Some with tall heads, some with wide, rounded bodies. A few appear to be holding children. Others stand with arms crossed. Perhaps they were charms, perhaps storytellers, perhaps just toys. One thing is certain. The people of the Crescent Dunes were not erased by war or invasion. They weren't conquered. They weren't destroyed. They simply moved. Nature pressed too hard, and they went searching for a kinder place. Civilizations like theirs disappear quietly. They leave few monuments, few writings, few tools sturdy enough to survive. Their knowledge passed from one voice to another until those voices faded, and then the dunes finished the story. But even though they vanished, they mattered. Their pottery designs inspired later groups. Their fishing methods spread across regions. Their symbols, though still unreadable, appear again in distant places, carved by later hands. Their influence traveled farther than their footsteps, and now, as we step away from the desert and leave their quiet world behind. The dunes settle again. The sand smooths over their memories and the people of the crescent. Dunes slip back into the soft, gentle place between history and legend. Our next journey takes us somewhere greener, somewhere older, and somewhere even more mysterious. As we leave the desert behind, the air grows cooler. The land changes, sand becomes soil. Dry winds soften into gentle breezes, and ahead of us, rising from the distant plain, is one of the most famous ancient settlements in the world. Çatalhöyük, historians love to talk about Çatalhöyük, its murals, its rooftops, its tightly packed homes. But tonight, we're not going there. Instead, we're walking past the famous city and into the quiet fields beyond it, where small, forgotten villages once stood. These villages never grew large. They never built giant shrines. They didn't leave paintings behind. They left barely anything at all. Just faint outlines of hearths, a few tools, and soft impressions in the earth that tell us people lived here. And then they didn't. Thousands of years ago, the land around Çatalhöyük was lush. Rivers wound through the plain like quiet silver threads. Tall grasses swayed, wild herds roamed freely. It was the kind of place where a small community could thrive without needing walls or armies. The earliest villages around Çatalhöyük were tiny clusters of homes, just a few families, maybe 20 or 30 people. They built rectangular houses from mud brick, with flat roofs that doubled as living space. Children played on the rooftops. Adults dried meat and grain under the sun. Their lives were quiet and dependable. They woke with the sunrise, gathered wild plants, stored food in small, cool pits. They hunted with stone-tipped arrows and fished in shallow streams. Nights were spent around small fires, telling stories passed down from older generations. If you stood in one of these villages thousands of years ago, you would see the great mound of Çatalhöyük rising in the distance. A bustling, crowded place. But here, in these smaller villages, life was slower, softer, almost peaceful. No one knows why these communities stayed small. Maybe they preferred quiet living. Maybe they didn't need more. Maybe the nearby river took care of all their needs. Big cities require pressure, problems, competition. These villages didn't. Their houses were simple but thoughtful. Mud brick walls kept the heat out. Small openings near the roof let smoke escape. Floors were lined with smooth clay. Some homes had platforms along the walls, places for sleeping or storing goods. These were not grand structures, but they were comfortable. Their tools tell quiet stories. Smooth stones used for grinding grain, bone needles for sewing, small flint blades sharpened again and again. These tools were practical, not ceremonial. They were meant to be used every day, not admired. What did they eat? Mostly barley and wheat ground into coarse flour. Lentils, chickpeas, wild onions, sometimes roasted meat from goats or deer, sometimes fish from the rivers. Meals were simple, wholesome, and shared. Unlike the main city, these villages left behind almost no art. No wall paintings, no elaborate sculptures, just small ornaments, a bead here, a carved bone there. It makes you wonder if they found beauty in everyday things instead. The land, the sunrise, the sound of water. But even these peaceful communities felt the slow hand of time. Seasons began to shift. Summers grew longer. Floods came at odd times. The riverbanks eroded. Quiet changes at first. Nothing alarming. Until the pattern refused to return to normal. As the climate shifted, their food sources became unpredictable. Crops didn't grow the same way. Herds moved elsewhere. Water levels fluctuated. For a village with no large granaries and no army, instability meant vulnerability. Meanwhile, the nearby city of Çatalhöyük kept growing more people, more homes, more demand for food, tools and labor. And slowly, the small villages began to feel the pull of its influence. Some families left their quiet homes and moved to the thriving city, trading independence for security. Others moved farther away, following herds or traveling toward cooler highlands. Within a generation, the villages were thinning. Eventually, the last remaining families faced a decision. Stay in a place with shifting weather, difficult crops, and fewer neighbors, or move somewhere more stable. Most chose to leave, and once they left, their small empty homes slowly returned to earth. What did they leave behind? Not much. A shattered pot, a fire pit filled with ash, hardened mud bricks that once held warmth and laughter. When archaeologists found these places thousands of years later, the signs of life were faint but unmistakable. And that's the mystery. These villages surrounded one of the most important ancient cities in the world, and yet they vanished almost completely from history. No records, no legends, no names. But their importance isn't in what they built, it's in what they represent. Most people in early history didn't live in grand cities. They lived in small communities just like these, with routines, worries, and joys we'll never fully know. Their traditions fed into larger cultures. Their methods of farming, cooking, and tool-making helped shape the world around Çatalhöyük. They were the quiet backbone of early life, the invisible threads that supported greater centers of innovation. When they disappeared, it wasn't dramatic. No war, no fire, no catastrophe, just a gentle fading. Houses collapsing under their own weight, fields returning to wild grasses, small paths washed away by rain. Only in recent decades did researchers uncover these villages. At first glance, they seemed too simple to matter, but the more archaeologists studied them, the clearer their role became. The everyday life behind the famous walls of Çatalhöyük. Imagine those final days, a family packing their belongings, rolling up sleeping mats, taking the last embers from their hearth, looking back at a home that held generations, and then walking away, unsure if they'd ever return. These villages may never be famous. They may never appear in textbooks or documentaries, but their silence is part of the story. A reminder that most civilizations don't disappear loudly. They simply grow quiet. Sometimes the absence of record says more than the presence of them. Sometimes what is missing is the most powerful clue. These unnamed villages, these forgotten families, they shaped history quietly, gently, invisibly. And now, as we step away from their soft, empty homes, the plain stretches out again. The grasses sway, the wind moves through spaces where voices once rose, and the lost villages around Çatalhöyük return to the stillness they've kept for thousands of years. Our next journey takes us farther east, where rivers once carved life into the land, and another forgotten people thrived in the shadow of a great civilization, a place where their names faded, their stories were buried, and the world never even noticed when they vanished. As we travel east, the land shifts again. The plains soften, the air cools, and faint outlines of ancient riverbeds appear beneath our steps. This is the world of the Indus Valley, home to cities like Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro. But once again, we're turning away from the cities and walking into the quiet hills beyond them. Here, tucked into shallow valleys and along rocky slopes, small communities once lived. They traded with the great Indus cities, but they never grew large themselves. No towering walls, no grand baths, no famous seals, just forgotten hill peoples who left almost nothing behind. The big cities overshadowed them, cities with streets, grids, storage rooms, and workshops. Meanwhile, these smaller groups stayed rural, simple, quiet. When the cities fell, they fell too. But without the stone foundations and baked bricks, their traces disappeared even faster. Thousands of years ago, the Indus Valley was green and fertile. Rivers carved through the land like silver veins. Hills rose gently to the north, covered in grasses and low shrubs. In these hills, life moved at a slower rhythm than the bustling cities below. The hill peoples lived in small clusters of wooden homes, a few families per settlement. Homes built from branches, clay, reeds, and packed earth. Nothing monumental, everything designed to blend with the land. They tended goats, gathered wild honey, farmed the slopes with simple tools. Their children carried baskets of grain along narrow footpaths. Their elders taught stories beside small fires that flickered against the rocks. Their tools were humble. Stone blades, wooden handles polished smooth by years of use. Bone awls for sewing. No metal, no luxury goods, no ornate craftsmanship. Just practical tools for a practical life. Despite their simplicity, they were not isolated. Traders from Harappa climbed the hills to exchange goods, grain for goat milk, beads for wool, honey for pottery. These interactions were small but steady, weaving the hill peoples quietly into the larger Indus world. The homes they built didn't last. Wood rots, clay crumbles, reeds disappear into soil. When archaeologists searched for them, all that remained were faint discolorations in the earth and small piles of river stones shaped by human hands. A few pieces of pottery tell us more. Their pots were simple, undecorated, fired at low temperatures. They preferred usefulness over beauty. Smooth, round forms, dark clay. These small bowls and jars are some of the only things linking us to their lives. A few pieces of pottery tell us more. Their pots were simple, undecorated, fired at low temperatures. They preferred usefulness over beauty. Smooth, round forms, dark clay. These small bowls and jars are some of the only things linking us to their lives. The hill peoples lived with the land, not against it. They followed seasonal patterns, moved between higher and lower ground depending on the weather. When rivers shifted, they shifted too. They didn't try to control nature, they adapted to it. There's no written record of their beliefs, but carved stones found in the hills show spirals, animals, and patterns similar to those in distant Indus sites. It hints at shared ideas, perhaps spirits of rivers, mountains, or the changing winds. Their decline began quietly. The great rivers of the Indus began to shift, drying in some places, carving new paths in others. Crops failed. Trade routes weakened, and like so many early peoples, they faced a choice: stay or move. Meanwhile, the major Indus cities began to collapse. Climate change, river shifts, food shortages. As the cities fell, the hill peoples lost their trading partners, the closest link to a larger world. Without stable rivers or reliable seasons, families began drifting away from the hills. Some moved eastward toward the Ganges plains. Others traveled south in search of more dependable rainfall. Some may have joined other tribes entirely. Imagine their final generations. Children who grew up watching the river shrink year after year. Elders who remembered when the hills were greener. Families discussing whether to stay or follow distant rumors of better land. Eventually, the last remaining villages faced the truth. Their way of life depended on the land, and the land was changing. They dismantled their homes piece by piece, taking wood, tools, and baskets. When they left, only the faint outlines of their settlement remained. Thousands of years later, archaeologists searching for clues to the fall of the Indus civilization stumbled upon tiny traces of these hill people's stone chips from tool-making, ash from cooking fires, a few beads made from river shells. Not much, but enough to say, they lived here. They mattered. These forgotten communities remind us that history isn't only written by great cities. It's shaped by countless small groups, families who lived, worked, and dreamed far from the spotlight. Their quiet lives supported larger civilizations in ways we're still discovering. Some of their practices, like hillside farming or seasonal migration, appear again in later South Asian cultures. Their pottery styles echo faintly in distant regions. Their way of life may have blended into newer tribes as the world changed around them. They didn't disappear because of war or conquest. They weren't destroyed. They simply blended into new communities, their traditions carried forward in subtle ways that no record can fully capture. Imagine their world one last time: quiet hills, narrow paths worn into rock, small fires glowing in the evening darkness, families gathering for simple meals, children laughing as they chase goats through the grass, ordinary moments now lost to time. History remembers what is loud. But these people lived in the margins, in the soft outskirts of a great civilization. And in those margins, life was gentle, calm, unrecorded, and eventually forgotten. Now, as we leave the quiet hills, the landscape evens out again, fields stretch toward the horizon. The echoes of their footsteps fade. The forgotten hill peoples return to the silence they kept for thousands of years. Ahead of us lies a different mystery. Not hills, not plains, but a place where ancient stones stand alone in the desert, pointing toward a sky filled with forgotten stars, a civilization older than pyramids, older than cities, waiting for us next. As we walk away from the quiet hills of the Indus Valley, the world around us begins to change again. Grasslands thin. The wind grows warmer. The earth turns from brown to gold. And slowly, almost without noticing, we arrive at the edge of a vast desert, the Sahara. It's strange to imagine, but thousands of years ago, the Sahara wasn't dry at all. It was green. Lakes shimmered under gentle sunlight. Grasses grew tall. Animals wandered in herds. And it was in this unlikely, fertile land that a small, mysterious culture began to build something incredible. This place is called Nabta Playa, a shallow basin in southern Egypt. Today, it looks empty, hot, silent. But beneath the calm surface lies one of the oldest known archaeological puzzles in the world. In the center of this ancient lake bed stands a circle of stones. Not as tall as Stonehenge, not as heavy, but older, carved and placed thousands of years before the famous stones of Britain were even imagined. We don't know their name. We don't know their language. We don't know their rituals. All we know is this: these early people traveled to Nabta Playa during the rainy season, gathering around temporary lakes and building something that outlived their entire culture. They were herders. They cared for cattle. They gathered wild plants and hunted small animals. Their shelters were simple, made from reeds, hides, and branches. Everything was temporary, yet carefully placed. For a community that moved with the seasons, building permanent stones seems odd. But the purpose becomes clearer when you study the sky above the desert. Some researchers believe the stone circle aligned with the summer solstice. Others think it marked important star positions. If that's true, it means these simple herders were early astronomers, watching the stars shift, noting the return of the rainy season, and perhaps using the sky as their calendar long before writing existed. Around the stone circle, archaeologists found strange arrangements. Cattle bones buried in pits, carefully placed and deliberately arranged. It suggests rituals, offerings, maybe early religious ceremonies. Was cattle sacred to them? Almost certainly. Some believe these people worship cattle the way later African cultures did. Others think cattle represented survival, rain, migration, nourishment, life. A symbol worth honoring in a desert that could take everything away. Imagine their gatherings, families traveling for days, setting up temporary camps near the shallow lake, sharing food, preparing ceremonies, watching as elders arrange stones in the sand with careful intention. For a few precious months each year, Nabta Playa transformed. The ground softened, water pooled, grass grew, animals drank at the edge of the lakes. It was a small window of abundance in an unpredictable world. When the lake dried, they left. When the rains returned, they came back. Their entire rhythm of life followed the shifting climate, a relationship that was both fragile and deeply connected to the environment. Because they moved often, their settlements left almost no trace. A few fire pits, bits of pottery, scattered tools, nothing grand, nothing permanent. Only the stones remain, silent, patient markers of something greater. Eventually, the rains became unpredictable. The lake stopped forming, grass disappeared, animals migrated elsewhere. Nabta Playa, once lush, slowly dried into the desert we see today. Imagine their final season here, the elders noticing the grass was thinner, the water shallower, the winds hotter, realizing, perhaps, that this might be the last time their community gathered in this sacred place. And so they left, maybe in small groups, maybe together, their paths branching like cracks on dry earth. They carried their belongings, their cattle, their traditions, but left their stones behind. When Nabta Playa finally dried completely, the stones stayed, the cattle burial stayed, the alignments they carved into the sand stayed. Everything else, their stories, their songs, their names, faded. Thousands of years later, modern researchers stumbled upon the stones. At first, they seemed random, just rocks in the desert. But as measurements were taken and patterns mapped, the truth emerged. Someone built this intentionally, carefully, thoughtfully. The stones tell us these people were organized. They gathered for shared purpose. They watched the sky. They understood time in ways that challenge our assumptions about early societies. But the biggest mystery remains. We still don't know what to call them. Historians gave them names: cattle cults, early herders, pastoral nomads. But none of these capture who they really were. Their influence may reach farther than we think. Some scholars believe their practices spread into early Nile Valley civilizations. Their cattle traditions may echo in later African cultures. Their astronomical knowledge might have inspired others. They weren't kings. They didn't build pyramids. They didn't leave behind gold or legends. But they left something more subtle. Proof that even the simplest communities can mark the earth in ways that outlast memory. Their stones point upward, toward stars that guided their seasons, toward the solstice that signaled the return of rain. Their architecture wasn't meant to impress the living. It was meant to speak to the sky. Every stone at Nabta Playa is a puzzle piece. Each one whispers a fragment of a story we'll never fully understand. And perhaps that's the beauty of it. A civilization preserved not in monuments, but in mystery. Now, as we step away from the ancient circle, the desert returns to silence. The wind moves through empty space. The horizon stretches with nothing but sand. The people who once gathered here remain only as shadows in the archaeological record. Ahead of us lies another forgotten world, not in deserts, not in hills, but across the sea. Tiny islands where early sailors built homes, shrines, and stories, only to vanish when the earth itself changed beneath them. Our next journey takes us to the lost island cultures of the ancient Aegean. As we leave the Sahara's dry winds behind, the world around us cools once more. Slowly, the desert gives way to blue. Gentle waves rise and fall, and before long, we find ourselves drifting across the ancient Aegean Sea. Long before Greece, long before palaces, long before the Minoans built their famous halls thousands of years ago, the Aegean wasn't dotted with kingdoms or empires. It was home to tiny island cultures, small communities of early sailors who lived on narrow stretches of rocky shorelines, shaping simple tools and telling stories now lost to time. These were some of the earliest people brave enough to cross open water. They built small boats from wood and reeds, lashed together with cord. Their journeys were short, from one island to the next, but in their world, even a short journey could feel endless. Most of their islands were small, barely more than hills rising out of the sea. A few trees, a handful of caves, rocky cliffs shaped by wind and waves. But to the people who lived here, these islands were the entire world. Their homes were simple shelters built from stone and driftwood. Walls low, roof flat, rooms small and cool. They cooked on open hearths and slept on mats of woven reeds, nothing luxurious, nothing permanent, just enough to live. Their tools were made of whatever the islands gave them. Sharp obsidian from volcanic rock, smooth stones from the shore, shells shaped into spoons or ornaments. Their craftsmanship was practical and quiet, the work of people who understood their land intimately. They lived mostly on what the sea provided: fish, shellfish, seaweed, and occasionally seabirds. They gathered figs and wild herbs from the cliffs. Their meals were simple but fresh, the kind eaten while watching waves roll into shore. What little art they created was carved into stone. Spirals, waves, simple lines representing fish or the sun. The beginnings of a visual language that would grow over centuries, eventually influencing the Minoans and later Aegean cultures. In caves across these islands, archaeologists found small shrines, smooth pebbles stacked carefully, shells arranged in circular patterns, bones placed with intention. These tiny offerings hint at rituals tied to the sea, the sky, and the changing seasons. Life here was fragile. Storms hit hard. Waves reshaped entire shores. Sometimes whole beaches vanished overnight. For people living so close to the water, the boundary between home and danger was always thin. Over time, the world around them shifted. The climate warmed. Sea levels rose slowly but steadily. Lands that were once safely above water began to sink. Shorelines crept closer. Homes built generations earlier suddenly sat at the edge of the tide. Some islands disappeared entirely. What had once been a hill above the sea became a reef below the waves. The early islanders watched their land shrink year by year, tide by tide, a quiet but relentless disappearance. And so, like so many forgotten cultures, they began to move. Some traveled toward larger islands. Others moved toward the mainland. Their simple villages slowly emptied as rising waters pushed them farther inland. As they moved, they encountered other groups, sharing tools, techniques, and traditions. Their small island culture blended with others. Their unique way of life did not end suddenly. It dissolved gently into the cultures around them. Eventually, a new civilization rose in the Aegean, the Minoans of Crete. Advanced, artistic, complex, their palaces and frescoes dazzled the world. In their rise, the small island cultures were overshadowed, lost in the brilliance of something larger. For thousands of years, these early sailors were nearly forgotten, their villages buried under layers of soil and ash, their boats long decayed, their stories carried only in faint echoes passed down in myth. But in the last century, archaeologists began to uncover them. Small tools hidden in caves, stones arranged in old patterns, pottery fragments catching light beneath layers of earth, pieces of a culture once invisible. Their remains tell us they were curious. They explored. They adapted. They used the sea not as a barrier, but as a pathway. They navigated long before navigation existed as a concept. Though forgotten, their influence lives on. In the seafaring traditions of the Aegean, in early pottery styles, in ritual practices found centuries later. They were the quiet foundation beneath the great Minoan civilization. But the water that sustained them also erased them. As sea levels rose, their homes washed away, their caves filled, their trails disappeared. What we find today is not a complete picture, but gentle fragments preserved by chance. Imagine their final days on those shrinking islands, families watching waves creep closer each year, choosing which belongings to carry, which to leave, looking back at homes they built with their own hands before stepping into small boats aimed toward new horizons. They remind us that not all lost civilizations fall in spectacular fashion. Some are lost, one tide at a time, 1 inch of shoreline, one quiet migration that leaves little behind. The pre-Minoan island cultures lived in the shadows of history, contributing to a world that would later overshadow them. Their simplicity, their resilience, their relationship with the sea, all woven silently into the tapestry of early human life. And now, as we leave their rocky shores and watch the ancient islands fade behind us, the waves smooth over the place where they once lived. Their memory joins the rhythm of the sea, gentle, steady, endless. Ahead of us lies a land carved by rivers and valleys, a region where early American cultures thrived long before recorded history. Our next journey takes us to the forgotten river peoples of ancient South America, whose quiet lives shaped civilizations that emerged after them. As we drift away from the Aegean Islands, the air thickens and warms. The sound of waves gives way to the faint rustle of distant valleys. Before long, we find ourselves in a land far across the world, the western coastline of ancient South America. Long before the Inca, long before temples rose along the mountains, long before records or legends, this coast was home to a quiet, early world, clusters of river communities living between desert sands and narrow valleys. It was an unlikely place to live. On one side, the ocean, cold, strong, unpredictable. On the other, a vast desert stretching inland. But cutting through the dryness were thin green lines, rivers winding like threads of life across the land. Along these riverbanks, small groups began to settle. No grand monuments, no carvings, no metals. Just simple homes, soft fires, and an early rhythm of life shaped entirely by the rise and fall of the river. Their homes were built from reeds, clay, and woven mats. Lightweight, easy to repair, easy to move if the river shifted. Families gathered under flat roofs, storing food in baskets and sharing meals cooked over low flames. Their days were steady, fishing in the morning, tending small plots of cotton or squash, collecting reeds to weave into nets and ropes. Nothing rushed, nothing chaotic, a life aligned with sunlight and water. Their tools were simple: shells for scraping, stone for cutting, bone for sewing. Many were shaped so smoothly over years of use that they feel almost like river stones, soft around the edges, almost warm to the touch. Fishing was their lifeline. The cold Pacific waters brought endless fish, and these early people mastered nets, lines, and woven traps. Some historians believe they understood the rhythms of tides better than most early agricultural societies understood their soils. As time passed, some villages grew slightly larger, a cluster of homes here, a communal space there. Nothing massive, but enough to suggest cooperation, shared work, and a sense of belonging. In these spaces, archaeologists found small platforms made of stone and earth. Maybe meeting places, maybe ritual spots, maybe just places to sit and talk. These quiet corners of early life feel human, relatable, familiar. Some sites contain little offerings: shells stacked in small piles, stones arranged in circles, feathers left carefully beside fire pits. Simple rituals, perhaps carried out at sunrise or the start of a new season. These river people lived just before one of the world's earliest great civilizations, the Norte Chico, but they were the foundation. Their farming, their fishing, their gatherings, their simple architecture, all seeds that later grew into something grander, while the Norte Chico would later raise large ceremonial structures. These earlier groups built nothing monumental. Their skill was subtle, shaping riverbanks, arranging stones, understanding how water moved through their world. Archaeologists found flutes made from bird bones in nearby areas, soft, delicate instruments. It suggests that these early people, too, understood rhythm, that they sang, that they played music along the river at night. But nature is never still. Over generations, the climate began to change. Rivers shifted courses. Some dried, others flooded unexpectedly. For a community dependent entirely on water, even small changes could reshape everything. One by one, the smaller settlements began to thin. Families moved closer to more stable rivers. Some joined growing regional centers. Others traveled inland, following rumors of richer soil. Eventually, the larger Norte Chico society emerged, building terraces, platforms, and impressive structures. Compared to them, the earlier river people looked tiny and simple. Their histories faded beneath the weight of new achievements. History often remembers what is tall, heavy, or monumental. The river people built none of these. Their legacy is small: a pottery shard, a fish hook, a woven mat preserved in dry sand. But these small things whisper of lives lived with dignity. Imagine holding one of their tools, a tiny stone scraper smoothed by countless hands. You can almost feel the rhythm of their work, the quiet patience of early life, a connection to people who lived without cities or kings. The last generations of these river people saw change unfolding around them. New settlements rising, new leaders emerging, new ideas spreading through the valleys, slowly, without conflict or collapse. Their culture merged into something larger. By the time the Norte Chico culture fully emerged, these early river communities had become invisible, absorbed into the flow of history, leaving behind only faint, gentle traces. Imagine one of their evenings. A family sitting near the river, the last light sinking below the hills, nets drying beside them. The soft murmur of water filling the quiet. A life without rush, without noise, without record. When they disappeared, there were no ruins left behind, no stone temples, no statues, only the river, always moving, always reshaping its path, washing away the marks of lives once lived beside it. But their silence matters. These early peoples carried knowledge, how to farm this land, how to fish its waters, how to survive the unpredictable climate. Their quiet innovations supported the rise of an entire civilization. Every great civilization is built on foundations laid by people who never see the full result. The river peoples of the Norte Chico were those foundations, unseen, unnamed, but essential. As we leave their valleys, the river continues on without us. It flows past the places where they once lived, smoothing over the last traces of their presence. The river remembers them, even if history does not. Ahead of us lies another forgotten world, not on land, but across the sea. Ancient maritime tribes who lived among waves and islands, navigating long before charts existed. Our next journey takes us to the quiet ocean cultures of Southeast Asia, lost beneath the tides of time. As we leave the river valleys of ancient South America, the world beneath our feet dissolves into blue once again. The air softens into warm salt. The horizon stretches endlessly, and slowly we find ourselves drifting into the vast waters of Southeast Asia. Long before kingdoms rose, long before records were kept, when the ocean carried the stories of people now lost to time. This region has always been a world of islands, large ones covered in deep forests, tiny ones no larger than a single hill, countless in between, and scattered among these islands were some of the earliest maritime cultures on Earth. Small communities who lived with the sea as if it were a member of their family. Long before maps, navigation, or written stories, these early groups built boats from hollowed logs and woven fibers. They traveled from island to island, guided only by starlight, currents, and memory. No empire commanded them. No single city defined them. They lived everywhere and nowhere. Archaeologists have found fragments of their vessels, curved planks, wooden pegs, plant fiber ropes. Their boats were light but strong, shaped to slide across calm water and cut through storms. Every piece was crafted with the same quiet patience as their lives. Most of their days centered around water. Fishing in the morning, gathering shellfish in shallow bays, traveling to nearby islands to trade or visit relatives. Even their stories, the myths they whispered under the moon, were shaped by tides and waves. Some lived in stilt houses above the water, safe from floods and storms. Others lived right on their boats, drifting between islands, carrying only what was essential. Some built small villages in sheltered coves, where waves broke softly against the shore. Their tools were simple: fish hooks carved from bone, nets woven from tough vines, sharp blades made from hard stone or shells. They carved paddles as smooth as river stones. They shaped pots from clay gathered along island banks. Everything they made was shaped by hand, shaped by need. Their meals came from the sea: grilled fish, sea cucumbers, clams, crabs, seaweed. Sometimes wild fruits from coastal forests. Sometimes roots gathered from mangroves. A diet quiet and clean, shaped by whatever the tide allowed. These cultures left behind almost no writing, no recorded legends, no stone monuments to anchor their names in time. Their history was carried only by memory, by spoken stories passed from one generation to the next. until the chain eventually broke. Despite their simplicity, their understanding of the sea was extraordinary. They read the currents by watching drifting leaves. They predicted storms from the shape of clouds. They remembered island positions using songs, long, gentle chants that marked distance by rhythm. Some small coastal shrines have been discovered, stones arranged in spirals, shells laid in patterns, carved totems buried in sand. These rituals hint at a belief system tied to the sea, the moon, and the spirits of ancestors who watched over them. From beyond the waves, life was communal. Nets were cast together, boats repaired together, meals shared. Children learned to swim almost as soon as they could walk. The ocean was not a threat to them. It was home. But even the sea that nurtured them slowly began to erase them. At the end of the last ice age, sea levels rose. Shorelines shrank. Islands were swallowed completely. Homes disappeared underwater. Entire settlements vanished without a trace. Archaeologists have found old fire pits deep below the waves, proof that villages once stood where fish now swim, wooden posts buried under sand, pottery shards caught in coral, all silent witnesses to worlds drowned long ago. As their islands shrank, families moved inland or sought larger islands. Some traveled far, across the Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, and beyond. They carried their skills and stories with them, embedding pieces of their identity into the cultures they joined. But migration scatters memory. Over time, their once unified patterns broke apart. Different islands developed their own traditions. Their shared language split into many. Their rituals diverged. In the process, the original cultures faded. Today, what remains are small clues. A fishing hook here, a broken pot there, a stone arrangement half buried along a shore. Quiet fragments that whisper of lives once lived in harmony with the ocean. Though they vanished, their influence echoes in the island cultures that followed, in boat-building techniques still used today, in languages that share similar roots, in rituals honoring the sea and the moon. Their legacy is hidden but alive. They had no kings, no palaces, no armies. Their greatness wasn't measured in stone, but in survival. The ability to navigate open water with nothing but memory and instinct. Some of the world's earliest sailors lived quiet, unrecorded lives. Picture one of their evenings, a small village of stilt houses glowing with firelight. Nets hung to dry, children laughing in the shallow water, the sky painted with stars, a family eating fish beside a quiet tide. Moments simple enough to be forgotten, yet deeply human. When the sea rose, it didn't roar. It crept, one high tide at a time, one shoreline at a time. Their villages didn't fall in a single night. They faded, gently and gradually, until the ocean smoothed over everything. Even now, beneath the waves, archaeologists believe more of their world remains hidden villages preserved under layers of sand, pathways that once connected islands, footprints sealed by mud long before the ocean claimed them. They matter because they remind us that history isn't only on land. Entire civilizations rose and fell over water, without leaving towers or tablets, but leaving behind knowledge that shaped future generations. These sea peoples had no single homeland. Their culture lived wherever their boats drifted. They belonged to the tides, the sunrise, the moon, the shifting winds. A fluid civilization, impossible to pin down, impossible to fully capture. When the last of their descendants settled into new communities, the original culture dissolved. Their songs blended into new melodies. their stories reshaped by new tongues. Their identity sank beneath generations of change. Now, as we look out over the quiet ocean, the waves move endlessly, rising, falling, smoothing every shore they touch. The sea remembers them, even if history does not, and in some way, they are still here. Ahead of us lies a place shaped not by water, but by ancient stone and distant horizons. A world where hunter-gatherers built monumental pillars long before cities existed. Our next journey takes us to the forgotten communities surrounding Göbekli Tepe, one of the oldest temples on Earth. As we drift away from the warm shores of Southeast Asia, the world beneath us rises into rolling hills. The air cools, the land grows rugged, and ahead of us stands a region older than cities, older than writing, older than any monument known to human memory. On the crest of a quiet hill lies Göbekli Tepe, a ring of massive stone pillars carved by hands that lived 12,000 years ago. But tonight, we're not stepping inside its circle of ancient stones. We're turning away and walking into the world that surrounded it. Göbekli Tepe didn't appear from nowhere. It was built by communities who lived nearby, small groups of hunter-gatherers whose names, faces and stories have long since vanished. All that remains are faint clues scattered across the land. Imagine a world before farms, before herds, before villages. Just wild hills covered in grass, herds of gazelles, flocks of stone partridges, patches of wild wheat blowing in the wind. This was the world of the people who shaped those ancient stones. Their homes were not permanent. They slept in small camps made from branches, hides and stones. Circular footprints pressed into the earth, fire pits blackened by years of cooking, scattered tools. Nothing built to last, yet echoes of life linger in the soil. Their days were shaped by the land, hunting at dawn, gathering roots and berries, moving across the hills with the seasons. They followed herds, they followed ripening plants. They followed the rhythm of a world not yet controlled by human hands. Their tools were simple but effective. Flint blades sharper than modern steel, stone hammers, grinding stones for wild grains. These tools, scattered around Göbekli Tepe, tell us the builders were skilled, organized, and patient. They lived on wild gazelle, wild boar, berries, nuts, and early wild wheat. They gathered plants by hand, crushed grains between stones, roasted meat over open fires, a diet shaped by constant movement and intimate knowledge of the land. Across the seasons, these communities returned to Göbekli Tepe's hill again and again. Not to live there, but to build, to carve, to raise pillars weighing tons, to gather for reasons we still cannot understand. Perhaps they chose the hill for its view, long horizons stretching in every direction, or for its location between hunting routes, or for spiritual reasons lost in the silence of prehistory. Whatever the reason, they came back year after year. No written records remain, but the carvings on the pillars show animals, spirits, symbols, snakes, foxes, birds, creatures of the land. Perhaps these figures guided their rituals. Perhaps the builders believed the world was filled with unseen forces. Göbekli Tepe may have been a meeting place, a site where different groups gathered during feasting seasons, bringing food, skills, stories, a place where communities strengthened bonds through shared rituals. The scale of the stonework suggests many groups worked together, not a single tribe, but several people who may have spoken different dialects, hunted in different valleys, and followed different migration paths. There were no kings, no chiefs, no central authority commanding them. These were free, mobile groups cooperating out of shared belief or tradition, an early example of humans organizing for a purpose larger than survival. Some members carved the pillars, some hauled the stones, some prepared meals, some cared for children. A massive collaborative effort, repeated generation after generation, yet leaving almost no trace of the people themselves. They slept in makeshift huts arranged in circles, hide stretched over wooden frames, flat stones used as seats, fire pits in the center, glowing through the night. In the morning, the ashes cooled and life continued. They moved with the seasons, north in spring, south in winter. Their knowledge of migration patterns rivaled modern science. Learned through years of observation rather than books, archaeologists found flutes carved from bird bones nearby. Imagine their nights. Fires glowing softly, voices rising and falling in early songs, music drifting across the hills, while pillars waited silently in the dark. Though their homes left little behind, their art remained on the pillars. Intricate carvings of animals, hands, and geometric shapes. These carvings were their memories, their stories, their way of marking a world they moved through that lightly. Göbekli Tepe is often called the world's oldest temple. But a temple is only meaningful because of the people around it. The forgotten communities who gave it purpose through ritual and presence. Some believe they built it to honor the spirits of animals. Some believe they built it to mark the seasons. Some believe it was a place of gathering, storytelling, and connection. Whatever the truth, it points to a world where the sacred and ordinary blended. Eventually, the hilltop gathering slowed. Climate changed, herds shifted. The builders moved elsewhere, seeking new routes and new opportunities. Göbekli Tepe was eventually buried, intentionally perhaps, and the communities dissolved into the flow of rising civilizations. Their camps decayed, their tools scattered, rain washed away their footprints. Wind smoothed over the places where they slept. Nothing picturesque remained, just faint traces beneath the soil. Millennia later, a farmer stumbled upon a carved stone while plowing his field. That accidental discovery led to excavations that revealed the pillars and hints of the people who built them. But the builders themselves remain invisible. They matter because they were the world's first large-scale collaborators, the first to gather for something beyond survival, the first to create sacred architecture without villages or rulers, a reminder of how early human imagination truly is. Imagine their final gathering, a last feast, a last hunt, a last ceremony beneath the rising stars. People who had returned for generations, slowly realizing this hilltop would soon be quiet. And then they walked away. After they left, nature smoothed everything. Grass covered their camps. Soil buried their tools. The hill grew still. The pillars slept beneath earth for thousands of years. Every monument humans built afterward, every temple, every shrine, every ceremonial gathering, carries a faint echo of Göbekli Tepe's builders. Their creativity became the spark for countless cultures. We do not know what they called themselves. We do not know their myths, their fears, their joys, but they shaped the beginning of sacred architecture, making them one of the most important unnamed cultures in human history. And now, as we walk away from the quiet hill, the wind settles around the ancient stones. The builders slip back into the deep silence they've kept for millennia, their presence felt only in the traces they left behind. Ahead of us lies more, the deeper world of the Göbekli Tepe region, and the later communities who came after. In part 2, we explore how the landscape changed and how the echoes of these early builders shaped the next wave of forgotten cultures. Imagine this. You return to the same ancient hill 1,000 years after the first builders walked away. The once busy gathering place is quiet now. Grass covers the edges. The pillars sit half buried, and the land around it has changed. The world is warming. Wild herds move differently. Plants ripen earlier. Streams shift their paths, and the small communities around the hill begin to settle for longer periods than before. These newer people still hunt and gather, but they stay in one place a little longer. Their temporary huts grow sturdier, their fire pits more permanent, their tools more refined. This is the beginning of villages, but only the very beginning. They are not the same people who carved the giant pillars, but they live in the shadow of the ancient hill. They walk past the buried stones without fully understanding them. To them, Göbekli Tepe is simply part of the landscape, a place their ancestors once visited, now softened by time. These later groups begin to experiment with wild grains. They gather seeds from the hillsides and scatter them near their camps. They tend small patches of land, watching some grains grow stronger year after year. It is not quite farming yet, but it is its earliest whisper. Animals that once moved freely across the plains, goats, sheep, wild cattle, begin to linger closer to human camps. People leave scraps of food. They build small enclosures from stones and branches. Over generations, wild herds become manageable. Some houses are dug slightly into the ground, lined with stones, roofed with wood and hides. Round rooms, small hearths, storage pits for grain. These are signs of longer stays, perhaps for whole seasons. Life becomes more predictable. Grinding stones sit near doorways. Piles of firewood gather neatly. Tools are repaired instead of abandoned. A familiar rhythm settles over the valley. In the distance, the once great pillars of Göbekli Tepe are no longer towering guardians. Time has tilted them. Soil has risen around them. Some remain standing, others lean, others lie hidden. But the carvings still catch the morning light. Archaeologists debate whether these later communities return to the hill for rituals. Small offerings nearby suggest they visited occasionally. But whatever ceremonies once echoed across the hilltop are now far quieter, almost forgotten. As their lives settle, their beliefs shift. The world is no longer entirely wild and unpredictable. People shape the land, grow food, raise animals. Rituals shift from honoring untamed nature to honoring cycles of seasons and harvests. Some individuals become skilled toolmakers. Others care for animals. Some specialize in grinding grains. Roles are not formal, but they help the community survive. Specialization quietly emerges. Many small settlements dot the region. Families in one valley trade with families in another, exchanging tools, baskets, dried meat, early grains. A gentle network forms. One of the most important changes is the creation of storage pits. Deep, cool holes lined with stones and clay. People store seeds, dried berries, nuts. For the first time, survival depends less on daily gathering and more on planning ahead. Winter becomes a season of stillness. Families stay indoors, sharing food gathered in warmer months. Spring brings movement. Summer brings gathering. Fall brings preparation. Their year follows a predictable pattern, something new in human history. Tools grow more sophisticated. Blade shapes change. Grinding stones grow larger. Flake tools become more precise. Simple pottery appears, crude but functional. A quiet wave of design begins. Children born now grow up differently than their ancestors. They learn to stay near the village, to feed animals, collect seeds, maintain the home. Their lives are shaped by belonging rather than wandering. Göbekli Tepe itself becomes a quiet ancestor, a place of old stories that few remember clearly. Some say their great-great-grandparents once gathered there. Some believe spirits live there. Others simply avoid it, sensing its age. Burial traditions shift. Instead of leaving the dead in natural places, some communities create small burial areas near their homes. Simple graves, bodies curled gently, small offerings placed beside them, a necklace, a stone, a carved bead. A few individuals become informal leaders, skilled hunters, knowledgeable elders, good organizers. Leadership is based on respect, not power. There is little evidence of major conflict, but sharper spearheads and stronger blades hint at defensive planning. Perhaps small disputes over hunting grounds or water. Nothing large, but the complexity of settled life begins to show. Eventually, the hill of Göbekli Tepe is intentionally buried. Layers of soil pushed across the site. Stone walls filled with rubble. The great pillars disappear beneath earth. Perhaps it was a ritual closure, the respectful ending of an era. By burying the site, the communities mark a transition. The age of wandering hunters is ending. The age of settled villages, farming, and domestic life is beginning. The hill becomes a sealed chapter of the past. These later communities do not think of themselves as descendants of monument builders. They see themselves as farmers, caretakers of animals, gatherers of grain. Their identity is tied to the land, not the stones. They leave behind hearths filled with ash, storage pits lined with clay, broken tools smoothed by years of use, footprints pressed into ancient soil. Small signs of daily life preserved quietly, villages grow more stable. Homes last multiple generations. People repair walls instead of abandoning them. They begin to see this land as theirs, not a temporary stop, but a home trade networks expand. Obsidian, flint, seeds, early pottery move between groups. Ideas spread. A regional identity forms, one that will soon support the rise of agriculture. Over time, these communities grow into the first farming societies. Temporary homes become permanent structures. Hunting tools evolve into farming tools. Rituals shift. The communities around Göbekli Tepe dissolve into the flow of civilization and become something new. They are forgotten because their lives were simple. No monuments, no writing, no dramatic ruins, just quiet villages that evolved into later cultures, leaving only faint clues of who they once were. Ahead lies another forgotten world. Tiny Arctic camps buried beneath snow and ice, where ancient whale hunters lived at the edge of survival and vanished without a sound. Imagine this. You open your eyes to a world covered in white. Not snow falling, not a storm raging. Just endless silent ice stretching in every direction. The air is crisp. The horizon glows pale. And somewhere beneath the frozen surface lie the remains of people who lived at the very edge of the world. The Arctic thousands of years ago wasn't empty. It was alive with movement. Drifting icebergs, migrating whales, and small communities of humans who followed them across the frozen sea. Fragile lives, held together by skill, memory, and instinct. These early people weren't farmers or builders. They weren't soldiers or traders. They were quiet hunters who survived using tools shaped from bone, stone, and driftwood carried ashore by the ocean. Their entire world depended on the ice and the animals that lived in it. Their shelters were temporary. Low domes made from bone frames covered in skins. Simple windbreaks built from stones and snow. Nothing fancy. Nothing meant to last. And yet, when these camps are uncovered today, they feel remarkably human. Footprints frozen into ancient floors, small hearth circles still intact. Their days followed the rhythm of the cold. Meltwater when the sun rose higher. Thick fog in early mornings. Nights lit by the northern lights sweeping quietly across the sky. Life here wasn't rushed. It couldn't be. Every action required patience. Their most important task was hunting whales. Not grand hunts like later cultures, but small and careful pursuits. They watched cracks in the sea ice, waiting for a whale to surface. They used harpoons tipped with sharp stone. When successful, a single whale fed an entire community. Their tools were masterpieces of necessity. Harpoon heads precisely carved, flexible lines braided from sinew, bone knives shaped to cut through thick hide and fat. Nothing was wasted. Every scrap of an animal became food, warmth, shelter, or a tool. They stitched clothing from animal skins, layering them to trap heat boots lined with fur, parkas sewn with delicate bone needles. Every piece of clothing intentionally shaped for survival. Even children learned early. They practiced small tasks, scraping hides, carrying snow blocks, tending fires. Their games mimicked hunting, teaching them through play how to survive in a landscape where mistakes were unforgiving. Though the Arctic looked frozen, the sea beneath the ice was their highway. In summer months, when the ice retreated, they used small hide-covered boats to travel between camps. Their movements were gentle, following animals and seasons. These cultures left no writing, but their rituals speak through artifacts. Small carvings of whales, amulets made from bone, patterns etched into tools. They honored the animals they hunted, believing each had a spirit that returned to the sea. Some carved miniature figures, tiny animals, human shapes, simple geometric designs. These weren't decorations but symbols. They may have been teachings, charms for luck, or signs of identity passed down from one generation to the next during the long Arctic winter. When the sun barely rose, communities gathered inside their small shelters. They repaired tools, told stories, shared food. The wind outside howled through the darkness, but inside, life stayed warm and close. When supplies dwindled, they migrated across the ice. Dog sleds had not yet been developed in these earliest periods, so families carried what they could and pulled the rest on simple sleds made from driftwood and bone. Most of what we know about them comes from small things left behind. A harpoon point buried in permafrost, a fire pit untouched for thousands of years, footprints preserved in frozen mud, quiet traces of daily life. They built no monuments, no temples, no cities. Their homes melted back into the landscape each season, but the knowledge they carried of weather, ice, migration, animal behavior was immense. Eventually, the climate shifted. Ice thickened in some regions. In others, it melted earlier each year. Whale routes changed. Seal populations moved. For people whose lives depended on predictable patterns, these shifts were enormous. One by one, small camps were abandoned. Some communities moved inland to hunt caribou, Others travelled farther along the coasts. Some faded into other cultures entirely, merging with new groups arriving from Asia. Archaeologists still debate what happened to them. Did they migrate? Did they starve? Did they merge with later Arctic cultures like the Dorset or Thule? The truth is unclear, like footsteps washed away by drifting snow. All that remains are quiet objects, a bone needle, a carved whale tail, fragments of a boat frame. These pieces feel intimate, like holding someone's memory long after their voice is gone. Today, when researchers uncover these sites, the Arctic remains silent, the air unchanged, the cold unchanged. It feels as if time paused, preserving their lives in frost. Imagine an evening in one of their camps, the sky glowing softly, a small group gathered around a fire, children curled in warm furs, the sound of breathing, slow and steady. A moment of safety in a harsh world. We don't know what they called themselves. We don't know their myths or their languages. Their world melted away, leaving only objects that hint at who they were. Yet they were skilled beyond measure. They understood how ice formed, how whales moved, how snow changed sound, how weather shifted. Their knowledge was carried in bodies and memories, not books. They matter because they show us humans can adapt to almost anything. Even the coldest corners of Earth were home. Even the harshest landscapes held stories. Their disappearance wasn't dramatic. No battles, no collapses, just slow change, until the camps grew cold. The tools lay untouched, and the ocean continued its ancient rhythm without them. Imagine this. Generations after the earliest Arctic hunters disappeared, the ice grows quiet again. Then slowly, another culture emerges, not from the south, not from the east, but rising from the same frozen landscape. These were the Dorset people, a group so quiet, so gentle in their presence, that archaeologists call them the ghost people of the Arctic. The Dorset lived in deep isolation. They did not mix much with other groups. They did not travel far. They stayed close to the ice, moving only with the seasons. Their life was a circle of winter hunts, spring thaws, summer gathering, and fall preparation. They built homes of snow and stone, reinforced with the bones of whales and seals. Some shelters were sunken into the ground to trap warmth. Others stood above the ice in half circles of carefully stacked stone, small, low, protective, made to withstand wind that could flatten anything careless. Their days were quiet, repairing tools, skinning hides, preparing food, waiting patiently near breathing holes in the ice for seals to surface. Life here was not fast. It was deliberate, shaped by instinct and endurance. The Dorset made tools unlike any other Arctic culture. Blades carved so thin they nearly shimmered at harpoon points polished to a soft shine. Carvings so detailed they seem impossible in such harsh conditions. Their craftsmanship remains one of the ancient world's mysteries. They were remarkable artists. They carved miniature figurines from ivory and bone, tiny humans with rounded faces, animals with expressive shapes, and masks with hollow eyes. These figures were not toys. They carried meaning, perhaps spiritual or protective. One of their most haunting creations was small carved masks, simple oval shapes with delicate eyes, noses, and mouths. Some look peaceful, some look fearful, some are blank or watchful. Whatever their purpose, they reflect a deep inner world. There is almost no evidence of conflict, no defensive walls, no weapons designed for fighting. The Dorset seemed to prefer solitude. They avoided competition. They lived in small groups far apart, leaving long stretches of ice between them. Their hunting style was patient and silent. Instead of chasing animals, they waited. They studied the breathing holes of seals, learning which ones were used most often. They listened for the faintest movement beneath the ice. When the moment came, their strike was precise. Their clothing was thick and layered, sewn from reindeer, seal, and fox fur. Everything was tailored to conserve warmth. Long sleeves, close hoods, double layers of fur turned inward. Even their boots were masterpieces of insulation. While other cultures sought forests or rivers, the Dorset stayed with the ice. They moved only a little each year, rotating between seasonal camps. Their world was white, blue, and silent, a palette that shaped their identity. No writings remain. No spoken stories survived. Everything we know comes from tools, bones, carvings, and the traces of their homes. Their voices were carried away by wind long before written history reached the Arctic. But their carvings reveal something unusual. An introspective culture, curious and observant. Their figurines often show exaggerated eyes, as if symbolizing watchfulness. Some scholars believe the Dorset lived with heightened awareness, a necessity in a world where weather could shift fate in minutes. One of the most surprising discoveries is that the Dorset did not keep sled dogs. In later Arctic cultures, dogs were essential for travel and the hunting. But the Dorset avoided them. Perhaps they feared attracting wolves, or perhaps their isolated culture valued quiet footsteps over speed. But the Arctic is never still over time. The climate shifted again. Winters grew harsher. Ice patterns changed. Whale and seal routes became unreliable. The Dorset had survived for thousands of years, but now their world was beginning to betray them. Then came the Thule, ancestors of today's Inuit, skilled, bold, and technologically advanced. They brought large boats, sled dogs, better weapons, and wider travel networks. The Thule did not conquer the Dorset. They simply replaced them, moving into lands the Dorset once called home. What is haunting is this. There is almost no evidence that the Dorset and Thule interacted. They lived near the same places, hunted the same animals, but seemed to avoid each other. It was as if the Dorset withdrew deeper into isolation, unsure how to adapt. Over the next centuries, Dorset camps grew fewer. Their tools became scarcer. Some of their last settlements show signs of dwindling numbers, perhaps from famine, storms, or slow cultural decline. Their once thriving world faded, and then they vanished, not in a single event, but through gradual disappearance. Generation by generation, fewer Dorset voices remained. Their art stopped. Their tools were left behind. Their homes collapsed under snow. Today, their legacy survives only in fragments. A tiny mask, a polished harpoon point, a delicate carving of a bear no larger than a fingertip. Each artifact feels like a whisper from a people who lived quietly and disappeared quietly. They are called the Ghost People because they left behind no clear ancestors, no known language, no direct cultural line. Their presence is visible, yet unreachable, impossible to fully understand. Picture a Dorset camp at twilight. A small group gathered around a low fire, snow drifting outside. A carved figure placed near the entrance for protection. The quietest moment of a quiet life, frozen forever in this ancient world. Over time, the wind covered their camps. Ice sealed their hearts. Snow pressed their tools deep into the earth. The Arctic erases without violence. It erases through patience. They matter because they show that even in isolation, even in silence, human creativity endures. Their art and tools remind us that beauty can exist even in places where survival itself is an accomplishment. Ahead of us lies another forgotten story, from the opposite environment entirely. Not frozen oceans, but shifting deserts. Not carved ivory, but sun-baked earth. Next, we journeyed to the lost desert nomads of the Empty Quarter, people who vanished into sand instead of snow. Imagine this. You wake up in a world made of light and sand. The horizon ripples under the sun. The sky is pale, and the ground stretches endlessly in every direction, broken only by dunes that look like waves frozen in time. This is the Empty Quarter, one of the largest and harshest deserts on Earth. The Empty Quarter is a place where footprints disappear within minutes, where wind shifts the shape of the land every hour, where anything left behind is swallowed almost instantly. And yet, thousands of years ago, people lived here long before it became the blazing desert we know today. This region was different. Rain fell more often. Grass grew in shallow valleys. Small lakes dotted the landscape. Herds of animals wandered through. In that earlier world, small nomadic communities moved across the land. These early people weren't city builders or farmers. They were travelers, moving from one water source to another. They followed animals, seasons, and the rhythm of the land. Their homes were light, their possessions few, their footsteps soft. Their camps were simple. Low tents made from woven mats or animal hides. Fire pits dug shallow into sand. Small piles of stones marking places where water once flowed. When they moved on, they left behind almost nothing. Only faint traces hidden beneath dunes. Each day was shaped by heat and shade. Movement before the sun rose too high. Rest at midday when the air shimmered with heat. Gathering again in the evening as the desert cooled. They lived quietly, guided by experience passed down from those before them. They used tools made from flint and stone, sharp blades, arrowheads, scrapers. Their craftsmanship was careful and efficient, tuned to a life of constant movement. Each tool was lightweight enough to carry, but strong enough to last through long journeys. Water was everything. Their most important knowledge was knowing where to find it. Hidden springs, deep wells, seasonal pools that appeared only after rare rains. Remembering these places meant survival. Forgetting them meant death. They followed herds of gazelle and oryx, animals who knew the desert better than any map. They watched birds circling above distant waterholes. They read the color of plants and the behavior of insects, understanding the land in a way modern travelers rarely can. Food came from hunted animals, gathered roots, wild berries, and dried seeds. Some groups stored food in small clay-lined pits. Hidden from animals and other travelers, every calorie mattered. At night, the sky above the Empty Quarter was overwhelming. Stars so bright, they cast faint shadows. Nomads used them to navigate, recognizing constellations as familiar guides leading them from well to well. The sky was their map, their calendar, and their companion. We know little of their rituals, but archaeologists found small offerings buried near ancient waterholes. Shells carried from distant coasts, stones arranged in circles, beads carved from bone. These hint at a belief system tied to the land, especially the rare places that gave life. Sometimes the nomads stayed longer than usual. When rains were generous or a spring overflowed, temporary villages appeared, clusters of huts that left faint archaeological stains, showing moments when wandering paused. But the world around them changed. Slowly, the region grew drier. Lakes shrank, grasses vanished, sand drifted across the land, covering old paths. What was once challenging but livable became harsh and unpredictable. Migration became harder. Water sources vanished. The animals they followed traveled farther between stops. For communities already living on the edge, these shifts brought quiet, accumulating crises. As the desert expanded, once safe camps became empty and lifeless. Families moved on, leaving behind tools too heavy to carry, fire pits filled with sand and footprints erased within hours by shifting wind. Today, archaeologists digging beneath dunes uncover small things: a flint arrowhead perfectly preserved, a broken pot fragment, a stone used to crush seeds, a hearth circle buried under ancient layers of sand. These tiny objects are the last faint voices of people who lived lightly. The desert nomads didn't belong to a single place. They belonged to movement. Their identity came from journeying, from knowing the land, the sky, and the seasons better than anyone else. Their greatest knowledge was simple: when to walk, when to wait, when to rest, and when to risk crossing open dunes. Without written records, everything depended on memory. Stories told around fires, directions whispered to children, warnings shaped into tradition. At night, temperatures dropped sharply. Families gathered close around low fires, wrapped in woven blankets and animal hides. The desert silence was so complete that even a single footstep could carry far into the dark. Their greatest enemy was the wind, gusts strong enough to bury a camp or erase a route entirely. Nomads learned to read the sky for signs of shifting dunes. They knew when to travel and when to shelter, reading the wind like a language. As the climate intensified, some groups migrated to greener lands, others joined nearby cultures. Many simply faded, swallowed by time and sand. No records were kept. Their final footsteps vanished almost instantly. What remains today are only hints. Ancient stone tools, simple drawings carved into rock, the faint outline of a hearth buried meters below sand. Tiny reminders of lives lived with resilience in an unforgiving world. They matter because they show how humans adapted to environments few would dare enter. They survived through knowledge, patience, and movement, building no monuments, leaving no cities, but living meaningfully within the silence. After days of walking through endless dunes, heat shimmering above the ground, you suddenly see something impossible. A patch of green, a thin line of trees, the faint reflection of water, an oasis. For ancient travelers in the empty quarter, this sight meant life, rest, and safety. Thousands of years ago, these oases were scattered across the region, small pockets of water fed by deep underground aquifers. Around them, people settled briefly, sometimes for weeks, sometimes for generations, and some oases became thriving little worlds, now buried beneath sand. The first groups to live here were nomads who paused their travels when water was plentiful. They built huts of reeds and mud. They shaped small irrigation channels with their hands. They collected dates from palm trees. A temporary life, but more stable than nomads had ever known. Their homes were round or rectangular structures made from sun-dried mud, supported by wooden beams carried from distant regions. Floors were covered with mats woven from reeds. Outside, small gardens grew wherever the soil stayed damp. Water shaped everything. When springs flowed generously, the community thrived. When water grew scarce, the settlement thinned. Children played near shallow pools. Adults tended crops or repaired damaged huts. Every part of their day revolved around the precious waterhole. These oasis cultures practiced some of the earliest forms of desert farming. Small patches of barley, lentils, or melons were grown with careful irrigation. They pressed seeds into soft soil with simple tools. Knowing each harvest mattered deeply, goats and sheep were kept near the edge of the settlement, feeding on sparse vegetation. Camels appeared later, becoming essential partners for travel across open desert. Animals drank from the same waterhole, joining the rhythm of shared survival. Even though they lived far from cities, these oases sat along ancient trade routes. Nomads passing through traded salt, stone tools, beads, or shells from the coast. In return, the oasis people offered dates, dried food, and knowledge, showing travelers where the next water source lay. Their days were simple and steady, gathering water at dawn, cooking meals, repairing reed mats, caring for animals, collecting fruit, washing clothes in shallow pools. Life was calm, predictable, and shaped by the limits of the land. Some oases grew large enough to develop communal spaces, shaded areas where families shared meals, told stories, and taught children about survival. Elders passed down memory maps of the desert, ensuring each generation understood where life could still be found. Nights at the oasis were peaceful. The sky stretched endlessly above, stars reflecting faintly in the still pools of water. Families sat outside their homes, letting the heat of the day drift away. The desert, calm and vast, felt almost protective. But even the oases could not escape change. As global climate patterns shifted, rainfall decreased. Underground water shrank. Springs that once flowed steadily grew weak. Over decades, the oasis communities faced uncertainty. Some years brought severe droughts. Pools dried. Palm trees withered. Gardens failed. Families packed their belongings and moved on, searching for a more reliable water source. Each departure left behind empty huts, slowly surrendering to wind and sand. The greatest danger was the sand itself. Winds carried grains that piled against walls, seeped into homes, and buried pathways. Dunes shifted and swallowed entire settlements. A place filled with life one season could vanish beneath meters of sand the next. One by one, oases were abandoned. Some are known today only through fragments, pieces of pottery, stone tools, traces of ancient foundations. Others remain hidden, perfectly preserved but unreachable. Deep beneath dunes, excavations reveal surprising details. Irrigation channels carved by hand, burial pits lined with stones, beads made from seashells carried from coasts hundreds of kilometers away. These clues show that oasis life was richer and more complex than many imagined. Some abandoned oases contain small altars, simple stone platforms placed near water sources. Archaeologists believe they honored water as a sacred force. Small offerings like beads and carved stones were left gently around springs. Life in the oasis depended on cooperation. Families shared water, tools, and food. When exhausted travelers arrived, the locals offered shelter and rest. Survival depended on kindness as much as skill. These people left no writing, no scrolls, no inscriptions. Their identity is known only through what remains, quiet objects preserved in silence. Their names, languages, and stories are forever lost. Eventually, droughts became too frequent. Springs dried completely. Without water, settlements could not continue. Families left, traveling toward greener regions or distant coasts. The oases remained empty. Over centuries, sand covered everything. Houses crumbled, gardens disappeared, fire pits filled, and the last traces of daily life vanished. The desert does not destroy quickly. It erases slowly, patiently. Some oases remain buried for thousands of years, untouched beneath dunes. When uncovered, they reveal pottery sitting exactly where it was left, tools lying beside ancient hearths, as if their owners stepped out only moments before they are matter. Because they show how humans built life in a place that offered almost nothing. They turned scarcity into opportunity. They adapted to cycles of water, sand, and survival. Their story is one of quiet resilience. Imagine their final evening. The last trickle of water reflecting fading light. Families packing belongings, children touching the walls of homes they may never see again. A place once full of life becoming silent. As they left, wind filled the empty homes, sand drifted across abandoned floors. The oasis slowly returned to the desert, leaving no sign of the people who had shaped it. Imagine this. You're walking through a jungle at dawn. The air is warm, the leaves are wet. The forest floor smells of earth and rain. In the distance, hidden behind thick vines and towering trees, lies the outline of a structure, something built long before the forest swallowed it. In Southeast Asia, some ancient cities were not made of stone. They were made of wood, walls, homes, temples, everything carved from timber. Beautiful, complex, and alive with activity until the forest reclaimed it. When wood decays, it leaves almost nothing behind. No ruins, no pillars, only silence. The jungle is relentless. It grows fast, breaks down wood, and buries entire streets under thick layers of soil. Generations lived and died in these cities, yet almost no trace survives. But using laser mapping from aircraft, researchers detected the faint shapes of roads, canals, and entire neighborhoods beneath the forest canopy. The jungle had hidden entire settlements larger than many medieval cities. Life here was ruled by monsoon seasons. Heavy rains, flooding rivers, fertile fields. People grew rice in terraced paddies using elaborate irrigation systems. Wooden bridges crossed waterways. Traders traveled by boat. The entire community lived in rhythm with rain. Their houses stood on stilts, lifted above wet ground. Roofs were woven from palm leaves. Floors were smooth timber. When the monsoon came, water pooled beneath the homes, turning the city into something that seemed to float. Families cooked over small fires. Children played along canals. Traders walked narrow paths with baskets of fish, fruit, and spices. In the evening, the jungle hummed with insects and distant echoes of wooden drums. Even the temples, once carved entirely from wood, are gone. Only the shallow outlines of foundations remain beneath layers of earth. The forest pressed in, wrapping roots around beams, tearing them apart. Over centuries, the temples vanished completely. These cultures did not fight the jungle. They lived with it. They built walkways around ancient trees. They let vines grow along walls for shade. They understood the forest as both protector and threat, a partner in survival. But eventually, the balance shifted. Population growth strained farmland, flooding increased. Insects damaged wooden structures faster than they could be repaired. Decline began slow but steady. As soil grew tired and waterways clogged, families moved away. Children who once played in wooden streets left behind empty homes. Roofs collapsed. Floors softened with rot. The jungle pushed inward, taking back the land inch by inch. By the time the last inhabitants left, the forest was already swallowing the city. Within decades, thick vegetation covered everything. Within a century, the city vanished completely. No stones, no carvings, no monuments. Only the earth remembered. When researchers scanned the land thousands of years later, they were astonished to see geometric patterns beneath the trees, straight streets, canals cut across wetlands, clusters of homes arranged in careful layouts. These lost jungle cities remind us that not every ancient civilization left behind grand ruins. Some lived beautifully and skillfully, in wooden worlds designed to breathe with nature. Their disappearance was gentle, quiet, almost respectful. And so, another forgotten world slips into history, hidden not by sand or snow, but by the green, endless forest. In the next chapter, we travel to a place shaped by cliffs and rivers, where entire civilizations carved their homes into mountains. You've traveled through deserts, forests, oceans, and frozen lands tonight. You've walked through ruins hidden under dunes, wandered along ancient ice, and stepped into wooden cities the jungle erased. All these worlds were once full of people, and now they are quiet. As you lie there, breathing slowly, let all of these forgotten civilizations drift through your mind like passing clouds. Nothing to remember, nothing to analyze, just gentle images of faraway places settling softly in the background. There's something calming about knowing that entire cultures lived their lives quietly, without monuments or fame. They rose, thrived, and faded, just like tides, seasons, and the changing wind. Their stories remind us of the natural rhythm of life. Tonight, you join them for a moment, walking beside people who left no written words but shaped the world in their own silent ways. Now you don't need to do anything, not even think, just rest. Take a slow breath in and let it fall out gently. The past is quiet. It has no rush, no urgency, no deadlines. Let your breathing follow that same pace, calm, easy, unhurried. Imagine time stretching far into the distance, civilizations rising and falling, landscapes changing, forests growing and disappearing. Everything moves slowly, and so can you. Let that feeling soften your shoulders and ease your thoughts. Right now, you are safe. You are warm. You are resting at the edge of the present, listening to the whispers of history. Your mind is allowed to drift. Your body is allowed to release the day. There's no need to hold on to any detail from tonight's journey. Let each place fade gently, dunes smoothing out, forest dissolving into mist, frozen landscapes turning quiet again. The world becomes softer with every breath. Close your eyes a little heavier. Let your thoughts slow until they feel like footsteps disappearing behind you. No pressure, no effort. Just the natural pull of rest. Say a quiet goodbye to the people you met tonight. The ice hunters, the desert nomads, the hidden villagers, the wooden city dwellers. Their stories are safe now, resting like you are. As your body grows still, imagine yourself lying somewhere between all those ancient worlds, A place where sand, snow, stone, and forest all meet a calm space. A peaceful space. A place made only for rest. If your eyes are still open, let them close slowly. If they're already closed, let them sink even deeper. Thoughts may wander, but let them wander softly, without direction. You're almost there, that quiet state where thoughts turn to dreams. Let yourself move toward it gently, like stepping into warm water or drifting down a calm river. Take one more slow, deep breath and let it fall out naturally. Your day is done. The stories are done. Everything can wait until tomorrow. Thank you for spending your night here, wandering through forgotten civilizations. Whenever you need rest or silence or a journey far from the present, you can return for now. Let the night hold you. Let the world dim and drift peacefully into sleep.